My name is Eleanor Vega. I am 72 years old, and I have spent my entire life building a family. I was born in a small town in Texas, but after marrying Thomas, we moved to El Paso, where we built our home and raised our only son, Derek. My husband Thomas was a hardworking man, quiet but loving in his own way. We celebrated our achievements and comforted each other through hard times. He worked for a construction company, starting as a laborer, and through years of effort and honesty, worked his way up to supervisor. We were never rich, but we never lacked what we needed. Our house in central El Paso was built piece by piece with patience and love. It was a 2-story home with a small backyard where I grew my plants. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Your support means the world to me. This is Stories of Mom Donna, where every story reminds us that even the quietest voices can rise with power. That was my special place, where I would hang laundry and sing along to my favorite songs. Derek grew up as a loved and spoiled child, maybe too spoiled since he was our only one. Thomas and I poured all our hopes and dreams into him. We supported his education in accounting at the University of Texas, paying for his books, meals, and transportation so he could focus on studying. When he graduated, it was one of the happiest days of my life. I remember Thomas crying with pride, though he would never admit it later. Derek found a job at a reputable accounting firm, and 2 years later, he met Vanessa at a company event. She was beautiful, elegant, and well-educated in business administration. When he introduced her to us, she seemed polite but distant. Thomas told me not to be judgmental, that she was probably just nervous about meeting us. Their wedding was simple but lovely, and I was happy to see my son start his own family. At first, they lived in a small apartment near work. We visited them some Sundays, and sometimes they came over for dinner. Everything seemed fine, though I noticed Vanessa always had an excuse to leave early. I have to prepare documents for tomorrow. I have a headache. There was always something. Over time, their visits became rare. Then our lives changed drastically. Thomas began feeling ill. We thought it was stress or fatigue, but the tests revealed something far worse: pancreatic cancer, already in an advanced stage. The next 8 months were a nightmare of hospitals, treatments, and watching the strong man I once knew fade away day by day. During that time, Derek visited occasionally, always in a rush, checking his watch. Vanessa appeared only twice, once for the diagnosis and once for the funeral. Thomas passed away one October morning, holding my hand. He told me not to be sad, that he had been happy by my side. After he was gone, the house felt unbearably silent. The first months were terrible. I cried every day, hugging his pillow that still smelled like him. Derek called me from time to time but never had time to visit. "Work is crazy, Mom," or "We have plans this weekend." Always an excuse. One afternoon, unexpectedly, Derek and Vanessa showed up at my door. My heart leaped, thinking my son had come to spend time with me. He hugged me briefly and they sat on the couch, exchanging nervous glances as if rehearsing something. "Mom," Derek started, "we've been thinking a lot about you. It's not good for you to be alone in such a big house." "I'm fine, son," I replied. "I have my plants. My friends from the knitting club come to visit." Vanessa interrupted, her voice calm but firm. "The thing is, we've been thinking about starting a family soon, and our apartment is way too small." Derek took a breath and continued, "So, we've decided it would be best for us to move in here with you. That way you won't be alone, and we'll have more space." I felt a mix of happiness and confusion. Having my son close again would be wonderful, but something in their tone made me uneasy. "And where would I live?" I asked innocently. Vanessa smiled for the first time during the visit. "We've thought of everything, Mrs. Vega. The rooftop is very spacious. Derek could hire some workers to make it comfortable, add a small bathroom. You always say you love being up there with your plants." In that moment, I didn't know how to respond. This was the home Thomas and I had built with so much effort, every corner filled with memories. And now they were suggesting I move to the rooftop as if I were an old piece of furniture that no longer matched their decor. "I'll think about it," was all I could say, though deep down I knew this was only the beginning of a change that would alter my life forever. Over the following weeks, Derek called me daily, asking if I had made a decision. Each time, he mentioned how expensive a bigger apartment would be, or how Vanessa was already planning the baby's nursery. The pressure was subtle but constant. One afternoon, while watering my plants on the rooftop, I tried to picture myself living there. It was spacious, yes, but exposed to the sun and rain. In winter it was freezing, and in summer unbearably hot. Climbing those stairs with my aching knees would not be easy. Still, the thought of having my son and future grandchildren nearby filled me with hope. Maybe it could be temporary, I thought naively. After much consideration, I agreed. Derek was thrilled and promised renovations would start right away. "It'll look beautiful, Mom. You'll have your own space, and we'll be right downstairs if you need anything." Work began the next week. They built drywall partitions to divide the area into a small bedroom, a tiny bathroom, and a kitchenette, installed narrow windows, and added a separate water tank. Everything seemed to move quickly. Meanwhile, I was packing my things downstairs. Every item I boxed carried a memory: the dinner set Thomas gave me on our 15th anniversary, the photo frames from our youth, the rocking chair where I once lulled Derek to sleep. I decided to take only the essentials, thinking I could bring more later. One Saturday morning, while choosing which books to take, I heard Derek and Vanessa enter the house with an architect. They were talking excitedly about changing the layout. "We could tear down this wall to make the space more open," the architect said. "Yes, and we can put an island here for the kitchen. I've always wanted one," Vanessa replied enthusiastically. I walked toward them, surprised I hadn't been told about any of these plans. "Good morning," I said with a forced smile. The three of them looked at me as if they had seen a ghost. Derek cleared his throat. "Mom, this is Ricardo, the architect who's been helping us with some ideas to adjust the house to our needs." "I see," I replied, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "And what kind of needs require tearing down walls?" Vanessa jumped in with that condescending tone I had started to despise. "Mrs. Vega, we just want to make some changes to modernize the place a bit. It's been a long time since the last renovation." "No, Thomas and I repainted the whole house 3 years ago," I said curtly. "Yes, but I'm talking about structural updates. The kitchen is really outdated, and the dining room feels too formal for our lifestyle." Derek, noticing my discomfort, tried to ease the tension. "They're just ideas, Mom. Nothing's been decided yet." Ricardo, clearly uncomfortable, excused himself and said he would wait outside. Once we were alone, I faced my son. "This house, Derek, your father and I built it with our own hands. It means something to me. You can't just expect." I couldn't finish the sentence. "Expect me to die. That's what they were waiting for." "Don't say that, Mom," Derek replied, avoiding my eyes. "We just want to make some changes to feel more comfortable. Besides, you won't have to worry about maintaining such a big house anymore. Up in the attic room, you'll have everything you need, and we'll take care of the rest." Vanessa, clearly impatient, glanced at her watch. "Derek, we have a lunch reservation at 1:30. Ricardo's waiting." My son nodded. "We have to go, Mom. We'll talk later." That afternoon, alone in what would soon no longer be my bedroom, I cried like I hadn't since Thomas died. I felt as if I was losing my home, my memories, and in a way, my son. The next day, Derek came alone to help me move my things to the attic room. The construction was finished, but the space was even smaller than I had imagined. My bed barely fit inside, leaving only enough room for a nightstand. The kitchenette had a small 2-burner electric stove and a mini fridge. The bathroom was so narrow that I brushed against the walls when I moved. "It's cozy," I said, trying not to sound disappointed. "You'll get used to it," Derek answered. "You can always come downstairs whenever you want." While unpacking my belongings, I noticed several boxes filled with Thomas's things that I hadn't had the strength to go through. I had left them in our closet, thinking that one day I would find the courage. "What's going to happen to Dad's things?" I asked. Derek stiffened. "I thought you could get rid of most of them." "It's been 3 years, Mom. We need the space." "Those are your father's belongings, Derek. I can't just throw them away. Then take them upstairs if you want to keep them, but we're going to use that room." His tone hit me deeply. It was as if his father's memories were nothing but an inconvenience, an obstacle to his plans. That night, my first night in the attic, I couldn't sleep. The street noise, the cold seeping through poorly sealed windows, and the overwhelming feeling of being exiled from my own home kept me awake. I could hear Derek and Vanessa laughing downstairs, music playing, glasses clinking. They were celebrating their new acquisition while I felt like an intruder. The days that followed were even harder. Vanessa began filling the house with new furniture, getting rid of everything Thomas and I had chosen with such love. Family photos disappeared from the walls, replaced with abstract art she called modern. Each change was like a small stab to my heart. One morning, I went down to have breakfast and discovered they had changed the lock on the front door. I tried my key, but it didn't work. I had to ring the bell as if I were a visitor in my own house. Vanessa opened the door, surprised. "Mrs. Vega, we weren't expecting you so early." "I just wanted to make myself some coffee," I said, confused. "My key doesn't work." "Oh yes, we had to change the locks. There have been burglaries in the neighborhood. We'll give you a new copy later." I walked into what used to be my kitchen and barely recognized it. They had torn down the wall that separated it from the dining room, installed an island just like Vanessa wanted, and replaced every appliance. My old dinnerware had vanished from the cabinet. "Where are my plates?" I asked, trying to control my temper. "We stored them in the basement. They were too old and didn't match the new design," Vanessa said without looking up from her phone. "You can use these new ones if you want to make something." She pointed to a shelf lined with identical white plates, plain and soulless. At that moment, I realized I was no longer welcome in what used to be my home. I was an inconvenience, tolerated only out of obligation. I went back up to the attic with my coffee, feeling a heavy weight in my chest. Through the small window, I looked out at the garden I had tended for decades and saw that Derek had started pulling out my rose bushes to make room for a new grill. My flowers, some planted when he was just a child, were being thrown away without a second thought. A tear rolled down my cheek, but I quickly wiped it away. I didn't want them to see me weak. I had to be strong, just like Thomas taught me. At that moment, I remembered I still hadn't brought up the boxes with his belongings. "Tomorrow," I promised myself. "Tomorrow I'll rescue Thomas's things before they throw them away too." But inside those boxes was something that would change the course of my life forever. The next morning, I woke up early. From my window, I saw Derek and Vanessa leaving the house, dressed formally. They were probably heading to work or some meeting. It was the perfect time to go down and retrieve Thomas's belongings. I waited until I heard their car drive away, then carefully went down the stairs. My knees ached more each day, but determination was stronger than any pain. When I reached the front door, I remembered that the lock had been changed, and they still hadn't given me the new key like they promised. Luckily, the back door that opened to the garden still had the same lock, probably because they hadn't gotten around to replacing it yet. I slipped inside quietly, feeling like a thief in my own home. The interior was unrecognizable. In just a few weeks, they had completely transformed the living and dining rooms. The rustic wooden furniture that Thomas had bought on a trip to New Mexico was gone, replaced with sleek, modern sofas in neutral tones. The lace curtains I had crocheted by hand had been swapped for metal blinds, and even the floor was different, covered with oversized tiles that echoed under every step. I walked toward what used to be our bedroom, now turned into Derek and Vanessa's master suite. When I opened the door, a knot formed in my stomach. The bed where Thomas had spent his final days was gone. In its place stood a king-sized canopy bed with silk sheets. The old wardrobe where we had kept our clothes had been replaced by a mirrored walk-in closet. I searched frantically for the boxes that held my husband's belongings, but they were nowhere to be seen. "Where could they have put them?" I whispered, feeling the anxiety rise in my chest. I looked under the bed, inside the new closet, even in the adjoining bathroom, but there was no trace of the boxes. I walked down the hallway toward what had once been Derek's childhood room. It was being turned into a nursery, with half-painted pale yellow walls and unassembled furniture stacked in the corner. The boxes weren't there either. I went to the basement, a small space where we used to store seasonal items and tools. The light was dim, and the air smelled of dampness. In one corner, carelessly piled up, I finally found the boxes marked with Thomas's name. But something felt wrong immediately. There were fewer boxes than I remembered. Before moving to the attic, there had been at least 8 large boxes with his things. Now only 3 remained, and they were open, their contents scattered as if someone had been searching for something specific. My blood ran cold. What had they done with the rest of Thomas's belongings? They had simply thrown them out without even asking me. I knelt beside the boxes and began sorting through what was left. Some old books, a few tools, loose documents, and clothes they apparently hadn't considered worth donating or selling. Among the papers, I found our wedding album. The black and white photos showed Thomas and me, young and in love, surrounded by family members who were now mostly gone. I ran my fingers over the image of Thomas in his rented suit, smiling nervously but happily. "I miss you so much," I whispered, tears streaming down my cheeks. I sat on an empty box to rest and think. I couldn't take all the boxes up to the attic at once, not with my limited strength and aching knees. I would have to make several trips, starting with what was most important. While organizing the items, I heard the front door open. My heart skipped a beat. They had come back earlier than I expected. Quickly, I grabbed the photo album and some papers that seemed important, stuffed them into a plastic bag I found nearby, and hid behind some shelves. "I told you I left the papers somewhere in the bedroom," I heard Derek say. "You always lose everything," Vanessa replied impatiently. "Did you check the basement? That's where we threw a lot of your parents' stuff." "Stored," Derek corrected her, though without conviction. "Whatever, we need those papers to show the lawyer." "Lawyer? What lawyer, and what papers were they talking about?" "I'll look down here. You check the office," Derek said. I heard his footsteps coming down to the basement. I stayed frozen, barely breathing. Derek turned on the light and began rummaging through the boxes I had just gone through. "Mom organized everything so carefully. It has to be here," he muttered while moving things around. Where would Dad have kept the important documents? After a few minutes of frustrated searching, Vanessa called from upstairs. "Derek, I think I found something in the office." "Coming," he replied, leaving the boxes even messier than before. He climbed the stairs quickly and shut the basement door behind him. I waited a few minutes to make sure they weren't coming back, then stepped out from my hiding place. My curiosity was burning. What papers were so important that they interrupted their day to come looking for them? And what did a lawyer have to do with it? I crept up the stairs and approached the office, a small room Thomas used to manage the household finances, now turned into Derek's workspace. The door was slightly open, and I could hear their conversation. "Here it is," Vanessa said triumphantly. "The property certificate for the house." "Are you sure it's the original?" Derek asked. "Yes, it has the seal and the notary's signature. With this and the death certificate, the lawyer can start the transfer process. And if my mom refuses to sign?" Derek's voice sounded tense. "We don't need her to sign anything, honey," Vanessa replied in a tone that made my blood freeze. "The house was only under your father's name. When he passed away, you became the natural heir. Your mother has no legal claim to the property." I had to stifle a scream. How could that be? Thomas and I bought this house together with our combined savings. It was true that he handled the paperwork, since back then it was common for property to be registered under the husband's name, but he had always assured me the house belonged to both of us. "I don't feel right doing this," Derek said. "It's Mom's house too." "It's a family asset," Vanessa replied coolly. "And now that we're having a baby, we need to secure our future. Besides, we've given her a place to live, haven't we? That's more than most families would do." "I guess you're right," Derek conceded. "The lawyer said everything is perfectly legal." "Of course it's legal," she replied. "Once the house is officially under your name, we can apply for the loan to renovate it completely." "And if Mom finds out, what then?" he asked. "She's already living in the attic," Vanessa said. "She can barely get around, and with that tiny pension of hers, it's not like she can move anywhere else. Besides, she can always go to a nursing home if she doesn't like it here." Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. They weren't just planning to take my house. They were already considering putting me away if I became inconvenient. My legs nearly gave out, and I had to lean against the wall to keep from collapsing. "Let's go," Vanessa said. "Our appointment with the lawyer is at 11, and I don't want to be late." "What if Mom comes back and notices the certificate is missing?" Derek asked. "I doubt she even knows it exists. And even if she does, what can she do? The law's on our side." I heard them gather the papers and get ready to leave. I quietly slipped toward the kitchen, exited through the back door, and climbed the outside stairs to the attic. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Once back in my little room, I sat on the bed trying to process what I had just heard. My own son was plotting to take away my home, the home Thomas and I built together with so much effort, and the worst part was that, legally, it seemed I couldn't stop it. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, swinging between tears and flashes of anger. Around dinner time, I heard Derek calling from downstairs. "Mom, want to come down for dinner?" For a moment, I thought about confronting them, shouting the truth I had just uncovered. But something stopped me. If they knew I was aware of their plans, they might speed things up, or worse, send me to a nursing home, just as they'd discussed. I needed time to think, to come up with a plan. "No, son," I said as calmly as I could. "I have a bit of a headache. I think I'll go to bed early." "All right," he replied, and I could hear the relief in his voice. "We'll save you a plate in case you change your mind." That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories of Thomas and our life together flooded my mind. I remembered the nights we both worked overtime to pay the mortgage, how we painted every room ourselves to save money, how we planted each tree and bush in the garden. This house was as much mine as his. I couldn't believe that, in the eyes of the law, I had no right to it. As the hours passed, my sadness began to turn into something else: determination. Thomas always said I was stronger than I thought. "My oak tree in disguise as a flower," he used to call me. "I won't let them take what's mine," I whispered into the darkness. "There must be something I can do, some proof that this house belongs to me too." And then, as if Thomas himself were whispering in my ear, I remembered the drawer, the last drawer of his old desk, the one he always kept locked. Shortly before he died, he handed me a small set of keys and said, "All the answers you'll ever need, you'll find here." At the time, overwhelmed by grief, I hadn't paid much attention. The keys had stayed tucked away in a box in my nightstand, forgotten until now. I sat up suddenly, alert. Was the desk still in the house? I hadn't noticed it during my earlier search, but I hadn't had time to check every room. Tomorrow, I promised myself. Tomorrow, I'll search every corner of this house until I find Thomas's desk. And then we'll see who really has the law on their side. With that thought, I lay back down. For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. I didn't know what I would find in that drawer, but I was determined to discover it. For Thomas, for myself, and for the truth. The next morning, I woke up with a clear purpose. I waited patiently, listening to the familiar sounds of the house until I heard the car leaving. When I was sure they were gone, I went down to the main floor. This time, I moved more cautiously, entering again through the back door. I didn't want to risk being caught off guard like before. I carried the ring of keys Thomas had given me and the determination to find his desk. I searched every room carefully. The desk wasn't in the office, nor in any of the bedrooms, not in the dining room, nor in the newly remodeled living room. My anxiety grew with every step. What if they had gotten rid of that piece of furniture too? Thomas had bought it at an antique auction back when Derek was just a baby. It was made of solid mahogany, beautifully carved, with multiple drawers, a stunning piece that had endured time far better than my son's loyalty. After searching the entire house with no luck, the only place left was the garage. We rarely used it to park the car since Thomas preferred leaving it on the street. Over the years, it had turned into a storage space for things we didn't use but couldn't bring ourselves to throw away. When I opened the garage door, my heart skipped a beat. There it was, covered by a dusty old sheet and surrounded by boxes Thomas's desk. They had shoved it aside as if it were junk, just like so many other pieces of our life together. I approached it slowly, almost reverently, removing the sheet and running my hand across the polished wood I had so often cleaned with beeswax. Despite the dust, it was still beautiful. I remembered how many times I had seen Thomas sitting at that desk paying bills, writing letters, or simply sipping coffee while reading the Sunday paper. I checked the drawers. The top ones were empty, probably already rifled through by Derek and Vanessa, searching for something valuable. But the last drawer, the small one in the center, was still locked. It had a tiny bronze keyhole adorned with a leaf pattern. My hands trembled as I tried one key after another from the ring until finally, a small golden key fit perfectly. I turned it and heard a satisfying click as the drawer opened. Inside was a manila envelope, yellowed with age, with my name, Rosario, written in Thomas's unmistakable handwriting. I picked it up with shaking hands and opened it. Inside were several documents, the first being a letter addressed to me. "My dear Rosario," it began in his elegant handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means I'm no longer by your side. I hope you never have to open this drawer. I hope our life together is long enough that these papers become unnecessary. But I've always been a cautious man, and there are things you need to know." Tears blurred my vision as I realized Thomas had prepared all of this years ago to protect me. The letter explained that although the house had originally been registered only under his name, as was common at the time, he had later made legal changes. Attached to the letter was a notarized will naming me the sole beneficiary of all his assets, including the house. There was also a newer deed listing both our names as owners. But that wasn't all. Among the documents were property titles for 2 lots on the outskirts of the city, investments in a construction company that had grown over the years, and a bank account Thomas had kept secret. "I opened this account the day Derek was born," he wrote. "Every month I deposited a small amount, thinking of our future, of a peaceful old age. I wanted to surprise you when I retired, and finally take that trip to Europe you always dreamed of. Life didn't give me that chance, but now it's yours. Use it wisely, my love." At the end of the letter, written in shakier handwriting, likely during his illness, he had added, "I trust our son will take care of you as we took care of him. But if that's not the case, these documents will give you the independence you deserve. You've always been stronger than you think. I love you forever. Thomas." I sat there on the dusty garage floor, holding the letter to my chest, feeling a flood of emotions I could barely contain. I held on to my husband's final gifts, feeling as if Thomas, even in death, was still watching over me, still loving me. As tears streamed down my face, a strange calm came over me. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't at the mercy of my son and his wife. I had options. I carefully placed the documents back into the envelope and returned to my small space in the attic. I needed time to think, to form a plan. That afternoon, Derek showed up unexpectedly. He climbed the stairs, slightly out of breath, wearing an expression that tried to look cheerful but couldn't hide his unease. "Hey, Mom, how are you? We haven't seen much of you lately." "I'm fine, son," I said calmly, slipping the envelope under my pillow. "It's just taking me a while to get used to this new arrangement." "It's for your own good," he said, repeating that phrase I had come to despise. "At your age, living alone isn't safe, and we're here to take care of you." I wanted to laugh in his face. Take care of me? By exiling me to the attic while plotting to steal my home? But I kept my composure. "I suppose you're right," I conceded. "By the way, have you seen your father's desk? There are some personal things I'd like to recover." Derek stiffened immediately. "The old desk? I think it's in the garage, but there's nothing important there. We already went through all the drawers when we organized his things." "All except one," I thought, but only smiled faintly. "Still, I'd like to see it. For the memories, you know." Sure, he said, visibly nervous. "When we have time, we'll take it out for you. No rush." "Of course," I replied, quietly savoring my small victory. "By the way, how's the remodeling going? Vanessa mentioned something about a loan." His eyes widened. "A loan? No, it's just some ideas we've been talking about. Nothing concrete." "I see," I nodded. "It's a big house. It must require a lot of investment." "Mom," Derek said, changing the subject abruptly, "I actually wanted to talk to you about something important. This weekend, we're hosting a small gathering at dinner with some friends and coworkers to show them the house." "That sounds nice," I said. "It's been a while since we've had company." Derek cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "It's just that, well, Vanessa thought it might be better if you—" "If I what?" I asked, already knowing where this was going. "If you could stay up here during the dinner," he finally said. "Vanessa wants to make a good impression on her bosses, and she thinks it might be hard to explain that my mother lives here." His words hit me like a slap. It was one thing to be pushed aside in daily life, but another entirely to be hidden away like an embarrassment. "Hard to explain," I repeated, my voice shaking with indignation. "Is it hard to explain that your mother, the woman who gave you life, who gave up her career to raise you, who built this home with your father, is still alive? Is that what's so complicated?" "It's not like that, Mom," Derek stammered, his face turning red. "It's just that Vanessa wants to make a certain impression. And I don't fit that impression," I finished for him. "I'm not polished enough, not sophisticated enough. For your new friends, is that it? Please, try to understand," he pleaded. "It's an important night for Vanessa. Her boss might offer her a promotion." I just stared at him, this man I had raised with so much love, now asking me to hide like some shameful secret. Where had my sweet little boy gone, the one who used to run into my arms when he scraped his knee? When had he turned into this selfish stranger who put his wife's image above the basic respect owed to his mother? "All right," I said finally, with a calm that even surprised me. "I'll stay up here. They won't even know I exist." Derek sighed in relief, completely unaware of the pain his words caused. "I knew you'd understand, Mom. We'll bring you something to eat later." "That won't be necessary," I replied. "I wouldn't want your guests seeing someone carrying food up to the attic and start asking awkward questions." My sarcasm went right over his head. "You're right. Maybe I'll just leave something prepared for you before they arrive." He stood up, visibly relieved to have solved his little problem. He kissed my cheek quickly, as if completing an obligation. "We love you, Mom," he said, but his words felt hollow. When he left, I stared at the closed door, feeling a mixture of sadness and fury burning inside me. The pain of his rejection was so deep it felt physical, like a hand squeezing my heart. But beneath that pain, something else was growing, a determination I hadn't felt in years. Thomas had been right. I was stronger than I believed, and it was time to prove it. I pulled the envelope from beneath my pillow and reread the documents, one by one. With each page, my resolve hardened. I wouldn't be a victim. I wouldn't let them erase me from my own life, from my own home. "This ends now," I said aloud, making a promise to Thomas, to myself, and to the woman I used to be, the one I was rediscovering. If you've ever felt pushed aside, made to feel invisible when you once were essential, you'll understand exactly how I felt in that moment. Life tests us in cruel ways, but sometimes those tests remind us of our true worth. If you want to know how I faced what came next, keep following my story. I promise what happened will surprise you as much as it did me. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept going over the documents I found in Thomas's secret drawer, mapping out possibilities, anticipating reactions. For the first time in a long while, I felt in control of my fate. When the first rays of sunlight crept through my small window, I had made a decision. I wouldn't act rashly. Thomas always said the best victories were built with patience and strategy. The first thing I needed was legal advice. Among the papers, I'd found a business card from Thomas's lawyer, a man named Carlos Ramirez. Was he still practicing after all these years? There was only one way to find out. I waited until Derek and Vanessa left for work, then went downstairs, not sneaking this time, but walking tall, knowing I had as much right to be there as they did, perhaps more. I found the old landline phone still in its usual spot. Calling from my cell would leave a record Derek could easily check, and I wouldn't put it past him to do it, given his recent controlling behavior. My fingers trembled as I dialed the number on the card. After several rings, a woman answered, "Ramirez and Associates Law Office, good morning." Relief flooded me. The firm still existed. "Good morning," I said, trying to steady my voice. "I'd like to speak with Mr. Carlos Ramirez, please." There was a pause. "Who's calling?" "This is Rosario Gutierrez, widow of Thomas Miller." Another, longer pause. "One moment, please." I waited, my heart pounding. Finally, a deep, steady voice came through. "Mrs. Miller, this is Carlos Ramirez. What a surprise to hear from you after all this time." "Mr. Ramirez." I exhaled in relief. "I wasn't sure you were still with the firm." "I've been here the last 30 years, ma'am. I'm very sorry I wasn't able to reach you after Mr. Miller's passing. I tried several times but never received a response." I frowned, confused. "You tried to contact me?" "I never got any messages." "I sent multiple letters to your address and even called the number on file. A young man always answered, said he was your son. He assured me he'd pass along my messages." A cold chill ran down my spine. Derek had intercepted the lawyer's communications deliberately. How long had he been planning to take the house? "Mr. Ramirez," I said, forcing my voice to remain calm, "I've just found some documents my husband left behind. I think I need your advice urgently." "Of course," he replied. "Would you like to come to my office? I can see you this afternoon." "Yes, thank you," I said, feeling a spark of hope. "Could you give me the address?" After writing it down carefully on a slip of paper and tucking it into my pocket, I hung up the phone with a renewed sense of purpose. The next step was to leave the house without raising suspicion. I didn't want Derek or Vanessa to find out about my meeting with the lawyer, at least not yet. I went back up to the attic and got dressed more carefully than usual, choosing a simple but elegant dress I used to wear back in my teaching days before I devoted myself entirely to family. I brushed my hair neatly and applied a touch of makeup to hide the exhaustion in my face. When I looked in the small mirror, I didn't see the defeated old woman I had become these past months. There was a spark in my eyes, a quiet strength that reminded me of the woman I used to be. I took the envelope with the documents and placed it inside a cloth handbag Thomas had given me on our last anniversary. Then, as quietly as I could, I went down the back stairs and slipped out through the garden door. I left a note on my bed saying I had gone to the market and would be back later, just in case they noticed my absence. The trip to Mr. Ramirez's office took longer than I expected. I took a taxi, aware that I was spending money I probably shouldn't, but the urgency of the situation justified it. As we drove, I stared out the window, surprised at how much the city had changed. I'd been so isolated at home, especially since Thomas's death, that I barely recognized some of the streets. The office was located in an old but well-maintained building in the historic district. Inside, a young receptionist greeted me and led me to Mr. Ramirez's office. The lawyer was a man in his 60s with silver hair and thick-rimmed glasses. When he saw me, he stood up and shook my hand warmly. "Mrs. Miller, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Thomas spoke of you often." "You knew my husband?" I asked, surprised. "We were friends, as well as partners in some legal matters," he replied with a nostalgic smile. Thomas was an exceptional man, very prudent, and above all, deeply devoted to his family. His words comforted me. It was good to know others remembered Thomas as the wonderful man he truly was. Mr. Ramirez invited me to sit down and offered me coffee, which I accepted gratefully. Then, with trembling hands, I pulled the documents from the envelope and placed them on his desk. "I found these yesterday in a hidden drawer in my husband's desk," I explained. "It seems Thomas took precautions I didn't know about." Ramirez studied the papers carefully, nodding from time to time. After several minutes, he looked up and smiled. "Mrs. Miller, your husband was indeed very thorough. These documents are in perfect order. The house legally belongs to you as co-owner with Thomas. The will is valid and properly registered. As for the additional properties and investments," he paused, flipping through more pages, "everything appears to be legitimate. In fact, the investments in the construction company have yielded significant dividends in recent years." "Dividends?" I asked, puzzled. "I've never received any payments." Ramirez frowned. "That's strange. According to our records, the dividends have been deposited quarterly into the account Thomas established." A chill ran down my spine. The bank account mentioned in the letter, I hadn't even known it existed until yesterday. The lawyer looked at me gravely. "Mrs. Miller, we should verify this account immediately. With your permission, I can call the bank right now." I nodded, feeling a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Ramirez made the call, identifying himself as my legal representative and providing the account details from the documents. After a brief conversation and some security checks, he listened intently to the person on the other end. His expression shifted from concentration to surprise, and then to quiet outrage. When he hung up, he looked me straight in the eyes. "Mrs. Miller, the account exists and it's active. The current balance," he paused as if to make sure he'd heard correctly, "is just over $5 million. I gasped, unable to breathe for a moment. $5 million. "Thomas was a very shrewd investor," Ramirez continued. "It seems the construction company where he held shares has done extremely well over the past decade. The dividends have accumulated along with the interest." "But I've never had access to that money," I whispered, still stunned. "That's the most troubling part," Ramirez said darkly. "According to the bank, there's a second account holder who's been making regular withdrawals for the past 2 years." My heart stopped. "A second holder?" "Yes," he said quietly. "Your son, Derek Miller." The revelation hit me like a bucket of ice water. Derek had not only known about the account, but had been using the money without my knowledge or permission. How much had he taken? What had he spent it on? The home renovations? The new car he bought last year? "How is that possible?" I asked in a broken voice. "I never authorized my son to be a co-owner." Ramirez double-checked the documents. "According to these papers, Thomas instructed that you were to be the sole account holder. For Derek to gain access, he must have—" He stopped, his expression hardening. "He must have found a way to alter the authorization. Someone must have forged his signature on the bank papers." The room seemed to spin around me. My own son, the boy I had given all my love to, had been stealing from me piece by piece. He hadn't just wanted to take my house. He had already been draining the money Thomas had saved for my future. "What can I do?" I finally asked in a voice that didn't sound like my own. "You have several options," Ramirez replied with professional firmness. "We can file a fraud complaint against your son. We can freeze the account immediately and request a full audit of all transactions. We can also secure your legal ownership of the house with a formal notice." The options swirled in my mind. Report my own son for fraud? The thought caused a sharp ache in my chest. But at the same time, the weight of his betrayal was unbearable. "I need time to think," I said at last. "We can start by securing the house and the account without involving the authorities, at least for now." Ramirez nodded understandingly. "Of course, we can proceed carefully. First, we'll change the account's ownership so only you can access it, and then we'll legally confirm your rights to the house. But I must warn you, Mrs. Miller, your son will likely not take this well." "I know," I replied, feeling a lump in my throat. "But I can't let him keep treating me like this. Thomas wouldn't have wanted it." "Certainly not," Ramirez said. "Mr. Miller always spoke of you with the greatest respect and affection. He would be proud to see you standing up for what's yours." Those words gave me the strength I needed. We spent the rest of the afternoon working on the necessary paperwork to secure my assets. Ramirez explained each step of the process, making sure I fully understood my rights and options. By the time I left his office, the sun was beginning to set. I carried certified copies of all the documents and Ramirez's promise that the account transfer would be completed in the coming days. We had also started the legal process to reaffirm my ownership of the house. As the taxi drove me home, I felt a strange mix of emotions: sadness over my son's betrayal, anger over the time and money lost, but also a rising sense of empowerment. For the first time in years, I was taking control of my life. When I got home, I saw Derek's car parked in front of the house. I took a deep breath, preparing to act as if everything were normal. It wasn't time to confront him yet. I needed everything legally secured before taking that step. I entered through the garden door and went straight up to the attic, avoiding both Derek and Vanessa. Once in my room, I hid the documents in a safe spot inside an old cookie tin under my bed. No one would think to look there. I sat on the edge of the bed, physically and emotionally drained. The weight of everything I had learned and done that day pressed on me, but beneath the exhaustion, there was something else: hope. "Thomas," I whispered into the quiet, as if he could hear me. "Thank you for looking out for me. Even now, I won't fail you." The tears I shed that night weren't from sadness, but from determination. The weak, compliant woman I had been for years was gone. In her place was someone stronger, more resolute, someone who would never again let anyone treat her like a burden. "It's time to take my life back," I promised myself as I stared at the stars through my small window. "And God help Derek when he finds out what I discovered in his father's last drawer." The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. During the night, as I tossed and turned, I had crafted a detailed plan. I wouldn't act out of anger or revenge, but with the same patience and foresight Thomas had always shown. The first step was to make sure every legal process was underway before any confrontation. Mr. Ramirez had promised that by the end of the week, all the documentation would be finalized and the bank transfer completed. I needed to buy time and keep up appearances until then. I decided to go downstairs for breakfast with Derek and Vanessa, something I rarely did since being exiled to the attic. When I walked into the kitchen, both looked up in surprise. "Mom," Derek exclaimed, "we didn't expect to see you up so early." I smiled as naturally as I could. "I slept very well last night. I think I'm finally getting used to my new space." Vanessa, who was making coffee, barely glanced at me before turning back to the pot. "That's good. Would you like to have breakfast with us, Mrs. Miller?" "If it's not a bother," I said, sitting at the table that once had been mine. An uneasy silence filled the room as Vanessa poured the coffee and Derek scrolled absent-mindedly through his phone. It struck me how strange they both seemed to me now, like strangers living in the home I had built with my family. "By the way," Derek said, breaking the silence, "where were you yesterday? I went upstairs to call you for lunch, and you weren't there." "I went to the market," I answered calmly, repeating the excuse I'd left on the note. I needed some fresh air and a walk to the market. "What did you buy?" Vanessa asked with a sharp tone. "I didn't see you bring anything back." I had expected that question, Just a few groceries, some staples. I left them up on the rooftop, I said. Derek nodded, apparently satisfied with my explanation. But I noticed Vanessa watching me more closely than usual. She had always been perceptive, and I would need to be more careful. Remember the dinner this Saturday with my bosses, Vanessa said, changing the subject. They've all confirmed. There will be 8 guests in total. That's fine, I replied, taking a sip of coffee. Do you need help with anything? Vanessa nearly choked on her coffee at the offer. No, Mrs. Miller, that won't be necessary. We've hired catering, of course. I smiled through it, letting them assume my cooking skills weren't up to their guests' standards. Derek looked uncomfortable. No, it's not that, Mom. It's just that we want you to relax, he said, and I finished his thought. And maybe stay out of sight. Don't worry, son, we understand perfectly, Vanessa added, protesting weakly. Mom, don't put it like that. How should I say it then? I asked, feigning innocence. That I remain confined to my room while you pretend. Isn't that a more polite way to put it? A tense silence fell over the table. Vanessa glanced at Derek, clearly waiting for him to manage the situation. He sighed deeply. You're overreacting, Mom. No one is asking you to be confined. It's just one night. And it's important for Vanessa's career, of course, I said, nodding. Vanessa's career always came first. If this arrangement makes you so uncomfortable, we can look into other options. Vanessa cut in with a strained voice. There are very nice assisted living residences in the city. There it was again, the barely veiled threat I'd overheard days earlier. Send me to a home if I became a problem. Those words used to devastate me. I would have begged them not to abandon me. But now, knowing the truth about my finances and legal standing, a cold, almost amused calm washed over me. Assisted living, I repeated thoughtfully. That's an interesting option. Perhaps I should consider it. After all, this house is full of memories, some not so pleasant lately. Derek and Vanessa exchanged surprised looks. They had expected tears and pleas, not this quiet acceptance. Well, Derek said nervously, we don't need to make hasty decisions. For now the arrangement works. I suppose so, I replied, rising from the table. Thank you for the coffee. I'll leave you to continue your day. As I left the kitchen, I felt their gazes on my back. My act had unnerved them, and that was exactly my goal, to create confusion, sow doubt, and buy time. I went straight to my room and called Mr. Ramirez from my cell. I no longer cared if Derek checked my calls, soon he would know the whole truth anyway. Hello, Mr. Ramirez, I said when he answered. Any news on our paperwork? I was just about to call you, Mrs. Miller, he replied enthusiastically. The bank processed your request surprisingly quickly. The account is now solely in your name, and we've blocked any unauthorized access. So soon? I asked, amazed at the efficiency. It seems your husband had very good standing with that institution, he added with some satisfaction. When I mentioned possible legal action for allowing fraudulent transactions, they were particularly cooperative. I couldn't help smiling. And the house? I asked. We're moving forward with that as well. We've already filed the original documents with the notary, and the property and the shares in the construction firm are under verification and being updated. When do you think everything will be ready? I asked, anxious for timelines. By Friday, we should have all documentation in order. Would you like to meet that day to review everything? That would be perfect, I said, thinking of Saturday's dinner as the right moment for a final confrontation. After hanging up, I sat down and mapped out the next steps of my plan in detail. I needed to be ready for any reaction from Derek and Vanessa knowing my son. He would first deny everything, then try to justify it, and finally, when cornered, resort to emotional manipulation, while Vanessa would likely drop her polite mask and reveal her true colors. I also had to consider my future beyond this confrontation. I wondered if I still wanted to live in that house, now tainted by deceit and betrayal, or if it was time to start over somewhere new, free from painful memories. That afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in a long time. I went to visit my old friend Carmen. She had been my colleague back when I was a teacher, and although we had drifted apart after Thomas's death, we had stayed in touch. I needed to talk to someone I could trust, someone with no stake in any of this. Carmen lived a few blocks away in a small apartment she shared with her sister. When she opened the door and saw me, her face lit up with surprise and joy. Rosie, what a lovely surprise. Come in, come in. Her cozy living room was filled with books and plants, reflecting her curious, lively spirit. Despite being around my age, she carried herself with vibrant energy. She poured us tea, and we sat down to talk. "You look different," she said after a few minutes. "There's something in your eyes, a spark I haven't seen in a while." Carmen had always been perceptive. "A lot has happened," I admitted, too much to explain in one afternoon. Still, I told her everything, the attic, the documents I'd found, Derek's betrayal. I held nothing back, not even the most painful details. I needed to purge the poison from my chest. Carmen listened intently, interrupting only to ask questions or voice her outrage. When I finished, she took my hands in hers. "Rosie, what they've done to you is unforgivable," she said firmly. "I never imagined Derek could act that way. He always seemed like such a good kid." "I used to think so too," I confessed. "Now I'm not sure if he's always been like this and I just refuse to see it, or if Vanessa changed him." "People change," Carmen mused, "sometimes for the worse. But you've changed for the better. You look stronger, more determined." "I feel like I've woken up from a long sleep," I admitted. "When Thomas died, it was like a part of me went with him. I let Derek make decisions for me. I let him push me into the background of my own life, but no more." "What will you do after you confront them?" she asked. "Will you keep living there?" It was the same question I had been asking myself. "I don't think so," I said. "There's too much pain in that house now. I've been thinking maybe I'll sell it, buy something smaller just for me." "You're always welcome here while you figure things out," Carmen offered warmly. "Thank you, my friend, but I think I need to be fully independent now to take back my freedom." Carmen nodded with understanding. "You've taken charge of your life again, Rosie. Thomas would be so proud of you." Her words moved me deeply. "Sometimes I feel like he's guiding me," I said softly, "as if he saw all this coming and left me the tools to handle it." "He was a wise man," Carmen smiled. "And you're stronger than you think you always have been." I returned home with a lighter heart. Talking to Carmen had cleared my thoughts and strengthened my resolve. I no longer had any doubts about what needed to be done. The next few days passed in an eerie calm. I kept up my act around Derek and Vanessa, pretending to accept my situation while quietly refining every detail of my plan. I visited Mr. Ramirez again, and we reviewed all the documents, discussing how Derek might react once he learned the truth. "Don't rule out a hostile reaction," Ramirez warned. "Not physical, necessarily, but verbal. He may threaten or try to intimidate you." "I'm ready," I assured him. That night, the last before the confrontation, I reviewed the paperwork one final time. Everything was in order. The bank account was now solely in my name, with a confirmed balance of $5.2 million. The house deeds and the land titles were updated, listing me as the rightful owner. The construction company shares had been verified and were worth a considerable sum. I went to bed feeling strangely at peace. Tomorrow would change everything forever, but I wasn't afraid. If anything, I was eager. "Thomas," I whispered into the darkness, "tomorrow we bring justice. For you, for me, for everything we built together. I promise I won't waste this second chance you've given me." With that promise on my lips, I drifted off to sleep, dreaming of a future that, for the first time in years, felt bright and full of possibility. Friday dawned clear, as if even the sky wanted to reflect my renewed resolve. I got ready with special care, choosing a navy blue dress Thomas had always loved. I applied a touch of makeup and pinned my hair into a neat bun. I wanted to feel strong, composed, worthy of the moment I was about to face. Before going downstairs, I checked the documents once more. Everything was perfect. I also confirmed the appointment scheduled that afternoon at Mr. Ramirez's office, where I would sign the final papers to fully secure my assets. When I walked into the kitchen, Vanessa was sitting alone, sipping coffee and scrolling on her phone. She looked up, startled to see me so well put together. "Good morning, Mrs. Miller," she said, scanning me with curious eyes. "You look different today." "Good morning, Vanessa," I replied casually. "I have a few things to take care of downtown." "Things?" she asked, her curiosity showing. "What kind of things?" I smiled faintly. "Personal matters. Nothing you need to worry about." I noticed how her expression shifted ever so slightly. The woman who had grown used to treating me like a helpless, dependent old lady now looked at me with a hint of caution. "Derek already left for work," she said, pouring me a cup of coffee. He went out early. He has an important meeting, but he'll be back around noon to help with preparations for tomorrow's dinner. The famous dinner, I said with a faintly mocking tone. It must be very important to you. Vanessa straightened her back, adopting that defensive posture she always took when she felt questioned. It's crucial for my career. The company's vice president will be there, and if everything goes well, I might finally get the promotion I've been working for. I wish you luck, I said sincerely. Despite everything, I didn't hate her. Vanessa was ambitious and calculating, but the real betrayal had come from my own son. I finished my coffee in silence, feeling her watchful gaze on me. Finally, I stood and set the cup in the sink. I'll be out this afternoon, I announced as I headed toward the door. Don't worry about me for lunch. Wait, Vanessa said, standing up too. Where exactly are you going? Derek asked me to keep an eye on you. I stopped and looked her straight in the eyes. For the first time since I'd known her, I didn't avert my gaze or let her presence intimidate me. Vanessa, I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly capable of handling my own affairs. I don't need your supervision. Her face showed a mix of surprise and irritation at my tone. Clearly, she wasn't used to me speaking with such firmness. I was just asking, that's all, she muttered, glancing back at her phone as if the matter didn't concern her. I left the house feeling lighter. This small exchange, insignificant as it might seem, marked the first real step in my transformation. I was no longer the submissive woman who accepted orders and oversight. I was reclaiming my independence. I took a cab downtown. My first stop was the bank where Thomas had opened that secret account. I needed to see for myself that I truly had access to the money my son had been using behind my back. The bank manager received me personally after I gave my name, a man in his 40s with a professional smile and sharp eyes. Mrs. Miller, it's a pleasure to finally meet you, he said, shaking my hand. Your husband was a valued client of ours. He led me into a private office, offered me coffee and water, and then, with efficient precision, opened a folder with my information. As your attorney may have informed you, the account has been fully transferred to your name, he explained. We've also blocked any unauthorized access. Unauthorized access? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. The manager nodded seriously. In fact, just yesterday afternoon, Mr. Derek Miller tried to withdraw 50,000 pesos. Naturally, the transaction was declined. A chill ran through me. 50,000 pesos. What could my son possibly need that amount for right now? Probably the expenses for the dinner tomorrow, or maybe another indulgence he planned to fund with money that wasn't his. How did my son react when the withdrawal was denied? I asked, curious to know his reaction. He was quite upset, the manager replied diplomatically. He demanded to speak with a supervisor and claimed there must be a system error. When he was told that the account was no longer under his name, he became visibly agitated. I could picture it perfectly, Derek, unaccustomed to being refused anything, especially something he thought was his by right. Was he told that I made the change? I asked. We followed your and your attorney's instructions precisely, he said. He was only informed that the account holder had changed and that he was no longer authorized to make transactions. Perfect, I said, feeling a grim satisfaction. Could I review the account activity for the past few years? I'd like to see exactly how much money my son has taken. The manager typed quickly and then turned the monitor toward me. What I saw stunned me. Over the 3 years since Thomas's death, Derek had been systematically withdrawing money, small amounts at first, a few thousand pesos here and there, which could have been justified as funeral or household expenses. But over time, the withdrawals grew larger and more frequent. Last year alone, he had taken over 1 million pesos. Trips to Cancun, purchases from luxury stores, payments to car dealerships, transfers to interior designers, every expense carefully documented. As you can see, the manager said, your son was using this account as if it were his own. The quarterly dividends from your husband's investments were deposited here, and he spent them almost immediately. How much money would there be now if my son hadn't made those withdrawals? I asked, feeling a mix of anger and grief. The manager did some quick calculations. Approximately 8.7 million pesos, considering deposits and accumulated interest. The current balance is 5.2 million. My son had burned through 3.5 million pesos of my money while confining me to live in an attic, making me believe he was doing me a favor by letting me stay in my own home. Would you like to make any transactions today, Mrs. Miller? the manager asked, pulling me back to the present. Yes, I replied after a brief moment of thought. I'd like to open a new, completely separate account and transfer 1 million pesos into it. Of course, the manager said with a nod. Any special instructions for the new account? I want it to be immediately accessible, I said firmly. I asked for a debit card I could start using right away, and within the hour, we had completed all the paperwork for the new account. I walked out of the bank with the card in my purse and the comforting knowledge that my money was finally under my control. My next stop was a real estate agency I'd noticed on my way there. I didn't have an appointment, but the receptionist greeted me kindly when I explained that I was looking to rent an apartment. Are you looking for something specific, ma'am? Asked the agent, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Lopez. Something small but comfortable, I said, preferably in this downtown area or maybe near the park, just a place for myself. Patricia showed me photos of several available apartments, but one immediately caught my eye, a second-floor unit in an old but well-kept building with large windows, a small balcony, and a view of a nearby park. This one looks perfect, I said. Could I see it today? Let me make a call, Patricia replied. The owner lives in the same building, so she might be able to show it to us right away. To my luck, the owner was home and agreed to meet us. Half an hour later, I was standing inside, completely taken with the place. It was modest but charming, with high ceilings and wooden floors. The walls needed a bit of paint, and the kitchen was dated, but it had character and, more importantly, it offered the independence I'd been craving. I'll take it, I said without hesitation. When can I move in? The owner, an older lady named Dolores, smiled warmly. As soon as we sign the contract and you make the deposit, it's yours. It could even be today, if you'd like. Perfect, I said, feeling a surge of excitement I hadn't felt in years. Let's sign now. We returned to the agency, reviewed the lease agreement, and I paid the deposit and the first month's rent with my new card, feeling a deep, indescribable satisfaction at making my first independent transaction in years. The keys are yours, Dolores said with a smile, handing them to me. Welcome to the building, neighbor. I held the keys in my hand, feeling their weight as a tangible symbol of my regained freedom. No more climbing up to a worn-out attic. No more asking permission to exist in my own home. This small apartment would be my sanctuary, my new beginning. I checked the time. There were still 2 hours before my meeting with Mr. Ramirez, so I decided to use it to buy some essentials for the apartment. I didn't plan to move in right away. I still had to face Derek, but I wanted everything ready for when that day came. At a nearby store, I bought sheets, towels, some kitchen utensils, and cleaning supplies. Then I stopped by a grocery store and picked up non-perishable food and basic items. Every purchase, no matter how small, felt like another step toward independence. I took everything to the apartment and arranged it as best I could. Looking around, I imagined how I'd decorate the space. There would be plants, lots of them. Maybe I'd even adopt a cat for company. The possibilities felt endless. With my heart full of anticipation, I finally headed to Mr. Ramirez's office for our appointment. As soon as I entered, he noticed the change in my demeanor. Mrs. Miller, you look radiant today, he said, inviting me to sit down. I feel radiant, Mr. Ramirez, I replied with a smile. I've taken my first steps toward a new life. I told him about my visit to the bank, the withdrawals I had uncovered, and the apartment I had rented. Ramirez listened attentively, nodding with approval. You've acted with remarkable clarity and courage, he said when I finished. Most people in your situation would have been paralyzed by such discoveries, but you've taken control in an admirable way. I had to, I said. For Thomas, for myself, for the life we built together. Very well, he continued, pulling out a folder of papers. Here are the updated deeds to the house, officially in your name, as well as the titles to the land outside the city and the documents for the construction company shares. We went through each document carefully, and when we were done, Ramirez looked at me seriously. The only remaining question is how you plan to proceed with your son. Have you decided whether to press charges for the fraudulent use of your money? It was the question I had been avoiding. Despite all the anger and hurt, the thought of taking legal action against Derek was hard to accept. I haven't made a final decision yet, I admitted. First, I want to confront him, hear what he has to say. Maybe there's an explanation. Ramirez nodded understandingly, though his expression suggested he didn't expect one that would justify Derek's actions. Of course, he said. But you must be ready for anything. Your son might act remorseful, or he could become hostile once confronted. I know, I sighed. I know my son, or at least, I thought I did. When do you plan to speak to him? Ramirez asked. Tomorrow, I replied with determination. During the dinner with their guests. The lawyer raised his eyebrows, surprised. Are you sure? That could be uncomfortable, with others present. That's exactly the point, I explained. With witnesses there, Derek will have to restrain himself. He won't be able to yell or try to intimidate me. A bold strategy, Ramirez said, smiling faintly. But an effective one, I must admit. Besides, I added with a small grin, after they went out of their way to ask me to stay hidden during this dinner, I think I deserve to make a dramatic entrance. Ramirez chuckled softly. Your husband was right. You're far stronger than you appear. When I left his office with all the documents safely tucked in my purse, I felt a storm of emotions, nervousness about the looming confrontation, but also a strange, peaceful resolve deep inside me. That night, the house was alive with laughter, glasses clinking, and the sound of polite conversation floating through the air. But when I stepped out from the shadows, silence fell like a curtain. Derek's smile froze mid-sentence, the color draining from his face as our eyes met. In my hands, I held the folder, the truth, the proof, and the end of his lies. This, I said softly, placing the documents on the table, belongs to me. In that moment, I wasn't the frail mother he thought he could control. I was a woman reborn steady, unafraid, and free. As I walked out of that house for the last time, the night air felt different, lighter. For the first time in years, I wasn't leaving something behind. I was taking myself back. If this story moved you, subscribe to Stories of Mom Donna, where every tale reveals the hidden strength of a woman who refuses to be erased.